It's Tuesday night. You've got your character sheet, a level 12 wizard. You've got your wizard staff, but you don't know where to go to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's Wednesday night. Your preferred store for playing Warhammer 40,000 is closed. You don't know where to go to play a pickup game. It's Thursday night. You're in a new city for work. You want to take Han and Chewie out for a spin in X-Wing miniatures, but you don't know where to go to play. These are all very real problems that people encounter. Fortunately, I've come up with a solution in a digital application that I built here at Savvy Coders. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to go ahead and convert it over to the screen that I'm going to share, where I'm going to walk you through the wireframes, how I approached this problem, how I approached the solution. We'll go through the actual app that I created and show you how close I was able to get to the wireframes. And then I'm going to go through a couple of the issues that I had, how I resolved them, and then that'll be that. All right, so let's start from here. So this was intended to be my home page. As you can see, I didn't know 100% what I wanted to do, but I had some ideas. I wanted an explanation of what the app is. I wanted a game and army selector, and I wanted a scheduling assistant. In other words, just links to some of the pages that I thought were necessary. And then I wanted something to kind of chain all the pages together. And then here would be where you would choose whether you were looking at Warhammer 40,000, Dungeons and Dragons, or X-Wing. And then this would still populate. And then here would be the actual scheduler, where you would pick which game you are looking for, which night of the week you're looking for, and then this area would populate based on the selections that you chose. And then we need to have an About Me with, obviously, a weird picture. And then some sort of contact. I was thinking a link tree for the company that doesn't exist, so that probably wouldn't work. Let's see how close we got. So this is DigiMeets. Welcome to DigiMeets. Instead of being able to put everything on the main pages, I just used a basic nav bar up at the top. This is a cool picture from ChatGPT. Notice the wizard is left hanging. That just makes sense. When you go to the About, this is about DigiMeets and future plans. I was not able to implement everything that I wanted to. The current state is minimum viable product, and the scheduler function does not work right now. There's a lot involved in trying to find real schedules. I probably could have just used some dummy data, but I didn't. And currently it's just an online army store for Dungeons and Dragons, X-Wing miniatures, Warhammer 40,000. Contact, it's a virtual business. This is a contact form. It doesn't work for now. It doesn't really need to. Then this, the goal here is to eventually make these into links to the different games you can play. Remove the links up here so that people are forced to come back to this page to pick which game they're using. The idea here is a little bit of expandability. Over time, you could not just have just X-Wing, Warhammer 40,000, or Dungeons & Dragons, but you could fill in Pathfinder, you could do whatever else without completely crowding out the links. Unfortunately, minimum viable product, we're not there yet. So let's start. Let's go to Dungeons & Dragons. Here you would choose a race, class, and level. We're going to do a Dragonborn, Wizard, as we discussed, Heroes of the Realm. We're going to submit, and it will automatically take us to Warhammer. So on Warhammer, we are going to do Leagues of Votann, because of course we are. Most games are played at 2,000 points. We'll do Strike Force. We'll click here to submit. It takes us to X-Wing. I tend to play Galactic Republic at Standard, so we'll push that. And here we go. We're now at this up here called Display. Here are the collected armies, which will show you information about your Dungeons & Dragons character, your Warhammer army, and your X-Wing army. Again, one thing that I was not able to get to is getting the scheduler to function. This is a future implementation. I have the days of the week up, so that's cool, but they don't go anywhere or do anything. So let's move away from this and let's dig into some of the code. I'm going to address a couple of the issues that I had and also explain how overcoming them is going to make things such as this much, much easier and expanding into different games much, much easier. All right, so I want to start at our index.js here. In here is where I have my third-party API. As we move down to here, in case D&D, in the view for D&D, is where my API lives. This is a semi-official Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition API. And the idea is this response is then stored into the store dnd.classes. That's where the data goes. The goal here is to have all data flowing for all of these games dynamically, because these games tend to update. They will lose a character class, they will gain a character class. They will drop a species, they will gain a species. Whole armies will be wiped out overnight. New factions will be added. I don't want to keep on top of that. I want it to come from a third-party API. So I've implemented that with Dungeons and Dragons. I did not implement that with either Warhammer or with X-Wing for reasons that I'll go over later. Then the question became, how am I going to put this data where it needs to be inside of the HTML? My original thought process was to build out some arrays in a separate folder along with some functions that would create elements on the actual HTML where it needed to be, and it would just create these and then append child to an item on the HTML. This worked, but the challenge became then how do I get each of those to have a different get event listener? With the guidance of some of the personnel at Savvy Coders, I was able to, and I wasn't aware that I could do this when I started this, inside of store, you can just put the arrays in here. You don't need a separate folder and then call functions when people go to a view. Just stick the information for the arrays inside the view. That just makes sense. You can see classes is empty. Classes is empty because this gets filled by the outside API. So this is on Dungeons and Dragons. This is for Warhammer, same concept. This is for X-Wing, same concept. Then when you go to the actual HTML, now that we have the data in the background where it needs to be, well, we go to D&D, and these are arrays. We can just treat them as arrays. So we start doing a map from the state folder to build out these boxes and these linkable objects. So when you're looking here at D&D, all of these are kind of being built dynamically as you move across views. The big challenge, of course, is as information is put in on a view, it cannot be saved when you move, for instance, from D&D to Warhammer. You just would have lost all that information. And that's where, going back to our index.js, we have a lot of different Axios calls. All of this is being pushed to this, sorry, when I say all of this, all the data which is input prior to the submit button on the different pages for Dungeons & Dragons, Warhammer, and X-Wing are being sent via Axios calls to MongoDB and then being read right back in to the store values for these arrays in the display view. So basically now at this point we can dynamically pull our data from anywhere in the web as long as it's got an API, and all this information is available. A lot of it's on GitHub. This one just happens to have an official API. There isn't one for Warhammer, but it doesn't matter. The information's on GitHub. You can just build an API to there by cloning the repo to your own to your account. So all the information can be dynamically loaded in there. Then it can be used through the store method inside of here. The only one currently doing this is classes into empty arrays, which are then treated as arrays to be built out on these pages through the map function. More interestingly, to add those event listeners I was talking about, when you go back to index.js, just pull the information, and this again was shown to me by Savvy Coders. We talked through the problem, and this is what we came up with. We rebuilt the arrays. They started at arrays. We're going to rebuild that information into arrays and apply event listeners, which will then push this information into a certain object. In this case, for Warhammer, it would be state. They're called warmies, W armies. And then when you click submit, this W army would be moved into a faction version of the data for request data. Request data would then be sent through the Axios API to MongoDB, pulled right back out, and pushed over to store.display.warhammer army. And that's basically how it works. The thing that I think is fascinating is basically this means we can pull data from anywhere, build it into empty arrays dynamically, have our web pages, our single page application, build these web pages dynamically, and then close it all down when we close. This is perfect because then as long as where this API is pointed to is kept up to date, my apologies, this API here, as long as this information is kept up to date, which I'm not doing, but there's plenty of people who love doing stuff like this, my web page will dynamically keep itself, my single page application will keep itself dynamically updated, thereby causing me to have minimal effort to have relevant, up-to-date information. Also leaves me open, I suppose, to getting bad data, but I will have to work with that when I work with that. So, in a nutshell, that's where we are at for DigiMeets. Going back to the about, currently it stores it. The next function I feel is the scheduler function. I also think we need a way to clear the arrays as they're being built in here. The information of what is being built in here needs to be displayed over here, and there needs to be a button for clear. Other things that I feel are simple implementations, I just did not get a chance to get to. And then on display, especially as we build in the scheduler, we're going to need a lot more real estate, and it's going to need to be built out in the same fashion as the rest of these items with clickable links. And that, my friends, is my single page application. Thank you.